Are there things that we can learn specifically about animals in captivity that actually might translate to some of the modern human problems as we kind of tend to be domesticating ourselves in ways and sitting in cubicles and that sort of thing?
When we look at animal behavior, right, there's a natural fear. I think it's been ingrained into all of us to not anthropomorphize, right? I remember when I was probably in 7th grade and we read Animal Farm, George Orwell's Animal Farm, and my teacher said, don't anthropomorphize, right? So I think there's this natural, or at least I had a real hesitation about when I saw animal behaviors, whether it was on a farm or in the wild or in a zoo, of making a connection. It seemed like potentially scientifically a problem. But what I did is I went back to the definition of anthropomorphism, and if you kind of look at it in a dictionary, it's the projection of human characteristics onto a non-human animal. But that's actually not, I think, the right definition. The right definition, or a better definition, is the projection of human characteristics onto an animal in ways that aren't scientifically justifiable. And as we're moving into an era where we recognize that psychiatric disease is a brain disease, it's a biological brain disease, the way heart failure is a cardiovascular disease, right? As we begin to do that, and as we begin to, in the 1970s, we did not have comparative genomics and molecular phylogenetics and neuroimaging, all of these advances that are showing us how connected we actually are. That now when we see behavior that has similarities or is in some way phenomenologically similar, that we can actually, if there's an error to be made, it's not going to be anthropomorphizing, it's going to be the human exceptionalism that sort of has been at the basis of that fear. But the point is, there are behaviors that animals show, but not just in exhibit, but not just in zoos. You see it in lots of environments. In our homes, you can see it, even in the wild. But let's focus on the case of zoos because you asked that. So one of the things that animal behaviorists do and zoos do a lot of thinking about and work around is enrichment. They want to make sure that animals, our mental health is so, any animal's mental health is going to be related to activities, opportunities, environments. And so the recognition that social animals shouldn't be isolated because that can trigger stereotypy, sort of repetitive behaviors that are pathological, so that there's an attempt to kind of create a social environment. And that there's a certain amount of play that needs to happen and a certain amount of open space for certain species. All of those things are, this whole world of animal enrichment, this occupies a lot of time, energy, focus, and innovation among people who are in that field. I do think we can bring some of that back to humans and in all kinds of ways. As you said, in many ways, our species is more captive than we are wild. We are everything from sort of the environments in which we live, how we access our food, the predictable nature of our interactions with others. All that stuff is more captive than it is wild. And one of the biggest ways in which we are more captive than wild is our relationship to food and our weight. And so one of the things that's interesting in zoos is that I think ecologists and people who think about environments recognize that part of dietary health and physical health is thinking about seasonality and the microbiome, and that part of eating is the planning and the strategy and the desire and the going for it and the failing and then the failing again and the failing again, because predators, carnivores fail far more often than they succeed, and then the getting of it, and then the tearing into it, and the sensory, the pleasure reward, all of that sort of, we animals evolved as eaters in that context where getting food was dangerous and thrilling and critical. and very dramatic, actually. I mean, even talking about it. And yet, you know, you look at how we eat now, right? It's fast food is the opposite of that. Anyway, I think that people in the I've gone to conferences with people who are experts in zoonutrition and animal behavior in relation to food, and they get that. They get the importance of that kind of stimulation. And I've actually brought that back, even with my own family, to, I was always busy. I was a busy cardiologist when I had kids, and my husband was super busy, and we were just like running. And, you know, I was not doing all of the components of making meals for sure. But I actually think it's part of the pleasure of eating, for me anyway. And I know that I was influenced by watching these descriptions of how animals eat in two different settings, when it's just given to them versus when they work. And that actually has influenced how I think about food and how I have my kids. So personally, that's been a change.
You make them chase after their meals a little bit.
I do. They have to rip into it with tear the fascia off the bone.